Hi, it's Pete the Bumbling Modeler. This is a quick introduction to this section. As I said on the previous one, I've had to split the video up because it's just going on and on and on. So this is a little bit more advanced than what you'll see in a minute, but I've recorded where I've got to this bit. So I've just got back off holiday and I'm trying to catch up and get all this together. If it's a bit disjointed, I apologise because it's trying to figure out what was up to and what I've said. I'm probably repeating myself. So this next bit, you'll see me do a bit of a pin wash around these, and I think assemble it. That'll end. Then that'll be the part 4 video. Then the part 5 will get up to this stage, and we'll put a bit of a wash over the lot. Then it's finished. So hope you like this next bit. Hope it's not too disjointed. Never have a holiday mid filming is what I've learned. It makes it very, very tricky to find out what's going on. But that's where we are, and without further ado, we'll carry on assembling the Brengun carrier. Hi, we're back again. So for me, it's the next morning. For you, this is an instant follow, and I realise this is, again, I got carried away the last one. It rambled on for quite a bit. Let's put some light on. It rambled on for quite a bit, so hopefully it wasn't too dull. So we did a pin wash, get some detail, and it's worked with a degree of success. You're better off with an oil paint to do it, but we haven't got that luxury if we're trying to work on a budget. So we'll deal with what we've got. There are some things on the desk that aren't related directly to this project because we're going to do a bit of dry brushing now. Now dry brushing with acrylics is a little bit tricky because they dry quite quickly, and you want a nice wet paint that'll stay wet on the brush while you're doing it. You'll see when we go along. So there's a few variances. So normally when I dry brush, I use one of these stubby little paint brushes. This one's from Army Painter, which I think is Games Workshop for their figures. So it's relatively soft and quite a wide bristle head. So I'll show you how I do it in a minute. Because that's not part of this, I'll put that away. So we're not using that. And things I typically use to dry brush are oil paints. So I think these have changed the name. I don't think they have Tai Lung anymore. Not sure why. But they're specifically formulated for model making, so it's got quite a fine pigment. So they'd be my normal preferred choice for dry brushing, and they stay wet forever. You just put them on a bit of cardboard to draw some of the oil out of, and then you're basically just brushing on pigment. So that's what I would normally use, but we're not using that. Another good alternative is the old-fashioned humble enamels, because again, they stay wet for quite a long time. So they are a pain when you're painting with them because they take so long to dry, but they are really nice paints with a really fine pigment, so they do work for this. But again, that wasn't part of our model because that costs us money. So we're left with using the acrylics we've bought. When I mix them, I'll put them in this little disposable shot glass. I don't normally like using disposable plastics, and I will reuse this again and again just by washing it out. It's a water-based paint, so it's okay. You want something deep and shallow to mix it in because it does dry out so fast. If you put it on a saucer or a flat surface, as I would do with the oils, it'll flash off and you'll only get a few strokes before it's dry out. So if you have it sort of shallow and deep, so if you haven't got disposable shot glass, you can get a bit of tin foil, wrap it around your finger and make a little cup like that to put it in. Anything like that, you don't have to be too fussy about this. But the other thing I'm going to do is this. We bought our 4 paintbrush set. The flat brushes, this one and this one, is what we're always going to use for painting flat surfaces because it's natural. You've got a flat surface that just fits on it. Jobs are good. We've got a round one we use for a bit of detail painting and putting in those pin washes, so that's all right. We don't do anything with that. We haven't really got a use for this round one. It's too big for detail painting. I should have got out the packet first. It's too big for detail painting, but it's a bit long for dry. Actually, it's got that initial glue that holds it together as well, which is a bit of a pain because for dry brushing it wants to be dry. We could try dry brushing like it is, but you've got a point now that's going to be digging in, and I think ideally you want a flattish surface, so when you're going over this isn't what I'm going to do, say, when you're going over you don't want it sort of dragging across everything, you just want it to, the tips of it to pick up. So what we're going to do is we looked at the Army Painter dry brush, which I quite like, and it works. So we're going to try and make something similar with this. I'm not sure how to, this is going to be brave. I've never done this before to a brush. Eek. But I have now, so we'll just trim off all the now that may be a bit stiff for what we want, but we'll find out as we go. And we've got some sticky up bits we'll try and trim off. I probably would have trimmed that a little bit longer had I not just done this in a cavalier fashion in front of a camera. Might work. We want to try and get some of the excess hairs out. So we only want it to touch the highest point on the model. We don't want it to necessarily just go there and just try and trim some of the I don't know if I'll hold enough paint to do it, but we'll give it a go. We've got nothing to lose. It might be a bit stiff, and if it is, we'll go on something else. But if you use your normal flat brushes you paint with, it destroys the bristles, so they'll end up all splayed out, then you can't get a good paint finish with them. So we've got nothing to lose by doing that other than a quid. Put the cap on that knife and put that out of the way. So I'll just go off camera and mix a bit of paint, and I'll be back with you. Okay, so we've mixed up a bit of our bronze green with a bit of this sandy sort of yellow. No set mix ratio. All you want is a lighter version of that overall green. What I would probably say is, because this is going to dry out, do it area by area. So do all this bit. Then if that's too dry, you can do the sides. Not too dry, do the sides. But if you do it in sort of elevations going up, if you do mix a slightly different colour paint, it won't be obvious that one's a bit lighter or a bit darker than the other. If you run out halfway through here and this side's a different colour on the dry brushing, that will stand out. So try and get the areas in one sweep. So what we need to do is get our newly destroyed paintbrush. I probably would have cut that 5mm longer in reflection. Get it all soaked in paint though. And the brush has to be completely dry with this as well. You can't use one you've had thinners on or anything, so absolutely bone dry. Anything you've got on, or smear it. So do that just to load the brush up first. Then put a little bit more on. And what you need to do, and that's why I like using paper towels for it actually. Tradition says cardboard because it absorbs the paint, is when you're going over it, you just want it to, you'll be able to see the texture in that paper towel. So that might be right. I'm going to put a lid on that on the off chance we preserve it. And I go to the underneath because, as I said, we're not going to see the underneath this. It's a good way to practice. And we just lightly, definitely our brush is a bit scratchy. It doesn't matter for some paints, but this is quite a delicate paint. So probably would have cut that a bit longer. That seems to be doing what we want. So as we go over that, you'll notice it's picking up bits of white around the edges on top of the white and light around the edges. And that's what you want. You just want to highlight. So I don't know if you can pick up on that, but you can see around this edge here, it's a slightly lighter colour. You can lighten it up to your tastes. And the more you do, the harder you push as the paint wears off. So you end up, and those little rivets now have got little white light. I keep saying white light patches. Don't try and mix your paint with white. If you did that with white, you look really chalky and horrible. Use a lighter tone, make sure it's not white. Anyway, we've got the brush working, we know that's okay. So all we do now is, you're never going to see these bits, but I'll just flash it over there. Just gradually work around your model. And what you're hopefully noticing, I'll bring up close to the camera later on. So these straps are only seen in it's a gradual process. But you see that just the edge of those straps are getting this lighter coloured paint on it, and around these raised rims here, which you will see, just don't know if you can see it, that side compared to that side. That side's got that light colour on the ridges, that side hasn't. So it just highlights all this little bit of detail we've got there. So the more the paint wears off the brush, the harder you push. You start off with quite a light pressure. And over that grill we've done, it's like a diamond pan. You can see there that the light colours raise it, highlighting out, and the black wash is in the diamonds is staying dark. So it's really making that stand out quite nicely. And try and get the edges, because again, people will be moving down here, they'll be pushing things along here. Edges will get worn. When the paint starts to get a little bit thin on your brush, load her up again, get your bit of paper towel. It's probably 90% wastage when you're doing this. I might actually lighten that up a touch. And then we've just loaded the brush again, so we go in gently, hardly touching at all. It's really starting to work now. Oops, a bit too much on that one, but you can't do anything about it if you go too far, but it will dry back a bit. So we're just picking up things like that little catch now. You'll see that starts to stand out on all the edges of that. Wherever this is here, we'll just... The gear lever, we're going to give a little blob of black paint on that later on. So too much paint on the brush now, actually. So hopefully you can see now we're just starting to get some sort of highlights on these areas, which means it won't look as bland when we've got all this locked up. You'll be able to pick out some detail. And again, along this top edge here, we can hit that grill. So that the bit we put in the mesh really starts to stand out. You can start to see them rivets are starting to stand out now as well. And with these edges, it's just tricking it. I mean, we've scaled down the Brengun carrier to a 30/50 size, but we haven't scaled down natural light. So that's another reason for doing it. It's a bit like pantomime makeup. It's exaggerated. It gives that effect. So you can start to see the edge of that bit of angle line. You start to see the rivets on the top. That's what we're doing. We're just trying to get those to stand out. And we go over the whole paint surface in general and just lighten it down that little bit. So again, you can see it's starting to just pick up details. You can see that little knob or lever there where it is. And that's really just the game, is going around. Everything we're going to put on the inside, we'll do that. And while we're at it, we'll do wheels and suspension as well. I don't know how much people want to see, so I keep the camera running, but I mean, I know it's probably pretty boring to watch. So I did have a bit of an experiment earlier on, and that one we can see we have dry brushed and you can get all the detail on it. This one's as originally painted, so we'll just gradually build up. I might go a bit lighter actually. This might be, could probably stand a shade lighter. But hopefully you can see on that the details are starting to spring out nicely. Not just the raised detail, just edges and everything. It's just that's really how I do things. This wheel sprocket, we've done one off camera. Just lightens the overall tone, and the effect should be subtle. It shouldn't stand out as, look what I've done. It should just be that. Just highlighting some areas. Right, so I'll carry on doing that and then come back when it's all ready to assemble. Okay, so that's just about done now. I think the trick with this, do it in such a way that you can't see it's done. It should be subtle, so if you can see it's been done, it hasn't worked. But we'll get close up on this little, where are we? This radio, if it focuses. Hopefully you'll see, pick out all the little dials and knobs. I pre-painted this in a bit black before I did it. And this outside has to be painted green, but I just wanted to get this done while I had it out. So it doesn't necessarily matter what colour, you just want a lighter shade. So I've used the same faded green on the black. So if you look at the wheels, it's picked up the edges of the tyres, picked up these sprockets quite nicely. Probably needs a little bit more on those. I did actually lighten it a little bit more off camera, and again, I don't, but people do a one pass of dry brushing, a one light shade, and then reinstate a bit more pale in it, and then go over again, but just picking on the higher areas. See this graduated thing, I just blob it on in one go. But that staged approach, you get like a color modulation, does work. And this wheel, you can see it went a bit heavy on that wheel, so all we need to do is lightly dry brush the back of it, because these are double-sided. So practice on something where it doesn't matter, like the underside or the back surface of a wheel or whatever. So we can just flip that wheel the wrong way around and you'll never see it when a bit too light on that. So yeah, again, now with the suspension springs, you can see the tops of the springs are a very, very pale green. Then the whole thing's that darker green, and the inside is the black wash we put on. So it's really highlighted that sort of feature. So yeah, that's dry brushing. You can dry brush with acrylics, as it turns out. They do dry out quite quickly. If you're modifying a brush like I did, I will probably make that little bit longer so it's not quite as scratchy, but it seems to have worked. There's not a big problem. And again, things like these boxes, you can see those ribs really stand out, as though light shining on them, which is one thing, and also as though many a footprint's gone over the top and lightly scuffed the paint. So it will be lighter because all the dirt and grime is constantly getting washed off by footfall. Flat areas such as this, I've done it because it just lightens the tone a little bit, but it also picks up on these edges, so it gives you that artificial shadow down there. So that's the dry brushing sort of completed. We can start to put this thing together, which will be on the next video. We'll put it all together. I'll paint the outside off camera, then we'll go through the dry brushing bit again, and we'll do little bits of weathering, or the limited weathering we can do with the equipment we've got. So I shall end this now. I'll probably carry on, but I'll start a new video for it. So this is the end of this section, dry brushing and sort of lightly weathering the interior before we assemble the thing. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you again soon. Bye. Hi, it's Pete the Bumbling Modeler here. So we're about to, I'm rushing that conversation, sorry. We're about to start the third part of this project. So that's going to be the assembly and a bit more weathering of the interior, then painting the exterior, and then we're as good as finished. But one thing I did forget to do was paint these seat cushions. Now, although you're seeing this at a different time, this is seconds after I've finished the dry brushing, because the advantage of dry brushing is if you're careful, you touch it straight afterwards. So I just put a bit more of the yellow into what we had as a dry brushing colour, just to make a sort of Hessian-y sort of buff. I'll need my head magnifier for this, sorry, just to make a Hessian sort of buff colour. So we're going to paint the seat cushions, then we'll go around later and touch in the green, but we'll go seat cushions first because we'll go light to dark. So it's just going to be a case of slapping this stuff on and hoping for the best. Bearing in mind you're not going to see a lot of this inside the vehicle. Probably needs 2 coats, so this is going to be a longer job. Should have done this sooner, sorry. I just forgot all about it, actually. Not too worried about those sides, you're never going to see them. You're going to see this from a plan view, really. So on the backrest, you need to be a bit more careful, but on this, just an overall colour from above is what you're looking at. Hopefully that's on camera still. Yeah, I'll do on the front. I'm just trying. Get much of the brush marks out as we can on that, and then we can come over and give it a second coat later on. So you don't want to watch me do that for a second, so I'll just put you on pause and then be back when they're painted. All right, back again. So for you it's been seconds, for me that was probably about 2 or 3 hours letting all the paint settle down. So I didn't need a second coat on these seat cushions, so all I've done really is touched in the green around the edges once they're glued on. This one here sits on these little supports, so what I've done is I've got it all in place, glued those supports in, but while they were still soft, manipulated them with the tweezers, which worked really well actually, and just tweaked everything so they're under the seat. You're never really going to see them, so if you'd miss them off, it's not the end of the world. I've realised I'd missed off that little mounting for the machine gun, which I'll have to touch in with a bit of green paint later on, but that goes on probably last of the body shell bits. So everything else is as you've seen it. The steering wheel had that little bit of bright and shiny stuff touched up, so that's ready to be glued onto that front panel. So we're going to glue this on. I'll do this. I mean, I'm speaking so no one knows how to use this stuff, but probably everyone knows better than me how to use tiny or extra thin. But what I'll do is I'll just chuck a bit in that groove to get things softening. You don't really want to put it on first in some cases, because that'll soften the plastic, and when this sits in we'll get a little bit of ooze, but here it doesn't matter because you'll never see it. So again, the correct way to use it now across this back is join it all up, squeeze down quite hard, make sure your fingers are well clear because it'll track down your fingers, and just touch into the gap, and that'll just race in there. You don't want to do too much manipulating like I've just done. Paint's still a bit soft actually, because you don't want a bead of glue oozing out of that. That's just sitting up slightly there. I'm well away from your fingers. I'll just touch the side, zipping it up, and we'll just hold that for a second or two. You won't really see anything underneath there. You see the way that's oozing up because I've put it on and squeeze. You want to squeeze then put it on, but that'll all dry off. It's not going to be a problem. I'll just put all down there. That could be a bit ugly, but don't forget there's this bit goes on the back here somewhere, that'll hide it, and you've got a couple of exhausts that'll hide it. So yeah, bit of a disaster, but nothing that's going to affect us from what we'll see. In that bubbling and beading, it's more the glue than the plastic, so that will flatten off, but a bit of an error. So that's basically in. And the next thing we want to do before we whoop the sides on is try and put a bit of dust in the bottom of the body shell. So to that end, we're going to get another blob of fairy liquid. Probably a bit much, so we'll get a bit of old tissue and take some out. I'm doing this because this is a water-based. The Tamiya one's alcohol, and that doesn't get as much surface tension. We want a little bit of the give it a bit of a shake first of this, and we'll call this a dusty colour, and we'll do that on the outside as well to make it sort of uniform dustiness. So a bit of that, and a lot of water. This wants to be like a wash. We don't want a lot, we just want to imply dust, so we want something really, really thin. So I said don't mix with the brush, but this is so thin it doesn't matter. That's way too thick we want, but you can see with we don't get any surface tension in that water now. It's got the soap in it, so it does help it a lot. Again, using our normal principle, we'll just go on the underside and see what it looks like. That's probably about what we want. That's a lot while I'm doing that. So it's very much like that pin wash we had on before, but it's thinner. And you only want to do this on the lower surface because that's where all dust and grime is going to accumulate. But if we just do this in the lower, possibly a bit on those boxes, a bit of artistic license really. Flick it a bit up the sides there, but not too far. You don't want to make sure you don't get any runs, and we just want it to accumulate like that around the bottom as though it's. Oh yeah, I'm going to get my fingers from underneath, but that doesn't matter. We're never going to see that. That's all. Just give it the slightest of touches in all these areas. Just bring it slightly up there. With that little bit of a grade. And we don't want to have any excess, so when we do, just dry your brush in your hand, just soak up a lot of the excess. We don't want big beads of it, we just want it to give like a dusty appearance on the lower faces of the hull, so we'll paint around here as well. So anywhere where we feel dust is going to accumulate, that you'll never see because it's underneath the floor, but we'll go right up just in case I've missed a bit. And we'll call that it on that. We don't necessarily want it, we can have a bit on the upper face if we wanted, I suppose. Maybe make that a little bit more watery. If you've got a plastic mat, you can always put a blob of water on that. Put in your brush, dilute it even more, just so it blends in, I suppose. Yeah, because you will get dust thrown up everywhere here, so that'll just hint a bit of even lighter dust on the top. I say it's not enough to change the colour much. It's just enough to make it look like you've got bits of grime and grot built up on it. And while we've gone over those, I'll just try and absorb a bit out of them so they stay black. Because we've done those, we better give a little finagle around the whole sides. Don't go too much beyond that. We will probably do this overall on the whole model to dull down the decals later on, but for now, I'm going to go wild, just so it just blends in. I've lost. Up it is. You just get that little build up in the corners, and it's just, again, it's just all this detracts the eye from what you're doing. Make sure gravity plays, so you don't want it running uphill. So if there's any danger if you put too much on, get a sanding stick or something of that ilk and just prop them up so you know it's going to gather in the corners at the bottom, not halfway up, because nothing more unnatural than rain and dust not sitting in the right direction. And that's all we need. That's what we need to do for now. There's a bigger blob there. We'll try and lift it. And it's starting to dry on the bottoms. You can see you're just getting those little dusty lines. Don't really want to do too much more than that. I don't really like it when vehicles look filthy because it's kind of disrespectful to the crews that are in them, I suppose. But as long as it's even and consistent, that's what we're looking for. We're trying to avoid massive blobs of this stuff, so let's see how it looks when it dries. Again, normally you do this with a pigment, but we haven't got one. But that would you'd be able to remobilize that when you've finished. But yeah, we're just, if you're looking down here, we can put a few marks in that are streaks if we wanted to show it's rain washed. They're not going to be massive as It's not something that's really going to catch your eye. It's just going to be there as a subtle background thing that you know is there, and it would look weird if it wasn't there. But it's try and give it that pull. What you have to do is an overall effect that doesn't really draw too much attention to itself. So we'll just, now we've done the top face on there after. So now this is something we can say is being used in Northern Europe in the summer, and it's got this dusty film from the tracks churning up mountains of dry earth. Is the wait? Oh, I forgot to glue a couple of bits on there. We'll paint them in later on. So yeah, we're getting a bit of a streaky, grimy look. We're getting a dusty look on top of all these, and I think that's what we need to do. So we shall put that to one side. Get ready to wash the brush out, and I'll switch this off, and I'll bring you back when we do a bit more assembly. Okay, thanks for watching. Sorry, just a quick extra bit I never mentioned before. So these Brenguns are painted the rubber black, and I've just gone over this one with the graphite. I'll do that now, but you can see, where are we? If I tip around the light, one's got that metallic sheen where we rub the graphite into it. Okay, I've done that before I paint the wooden bits, because you also that and that and the charging handle thing there. You don't really want to get the graphite onto the wood. It'd look a bit silly, and eventually that one, I believe, sits there stored in the side of the thing, so you're not going to see the front of that. So you can see the muzzle is a solid piece of plastic. On the one that's going to be poking out of the front, haven't put the graphite on that yet. What I've done is I've got the craft knife and hold hands around the barrel. You can't put any pressure, so hold it right at the end so you're pinching it. And I've stuck the knife in and slowly twisted. Now, if you're not confident, don't do it. You've got a knife close to your fingers. I'm not putting downward pressure on it. I'm just twisting, and it's taking its time. It goes through, but eventually, the camera will pick that up. You get that hollow muzzle, and it's a silly little thing. But when that's sticking out of the front of the carrier, that's facing you. If that was blocked off as a solid lump, it just wouldn't look right. So having a hole in the end of it makes all the difference, and it's 2 minutes with a knife. But you are hold it right at the end because that's so flexible. Any pressure, you'll snap it off. So literally hold it where you're drilling and start off with the knife and just gently twist. No downward pressure, then it won't slip. It'll bury into the plastic. And if it goes off center, you just sort of, when it gets to the end, just ream bits out until you've centered the hole. It's quite simple to do. It sounds worse than it really is, but I think it makes a lot of difference when that's going to be poking out the front of the carrier. Anyway, I'll get on, I'll metalize these or paint the brown. You'll see all when it's assembled, but that's the only bit that's not following the instructions. So I thought I'd mention it. Okay, thanks.